PhD Paolo Di Prodi is the founder of Priam Cyber AI Ltd, based in London, UK. Prior to that, he was a senior data scientist at Fortinet Ltd, a security ML engineer at Microsoft Corp, an ML engineer context IaaS, now Accenture, and ML architect at UCAS Ltd. He worked as a leading role with the Cyber Threat Alliance and the MITRE CTID projects. He contributes to the STIX2.1 OASIS project, the EPSS FIRST-ORG project, and is a member of the AI SIG at FIRST-ORG. He holds a PhD in ML multi-agent systems and a Royal Fellowship Award for Applied ML. His prior experience as a hacker involved penetration testing and malware reverse engineering. In his spare time, he builds and flies his own drones. Now, here is Paolo.
So yeah, I'm Paolo, and we're going to talk about security operations and cognitive barriers today. So just something about myself. I have I'm an engineer, but I did research in computational neuroscience, which is kind of a different spin on cybersecurity. So I then moved into enterprise. So I worked as a senior data scientist for Fortinet, Microsoft. I then founded this current company called Priam Cyber AI that specializes in security automations. But I also contribute to various projects. So I put some of them on that slide. So there is OASIS, the Cybersecurity Alliance, the Cyber Threat Alliance, MITRE, OCSF, and the EPSS systems. There's kind of a lot of acronyms there, but like if you want to know more about them, like you can just ping me, and I can talk about those specific projects. In my professional experience, I worked mostly on high-profile cyber incidents that involved like law enforcement and agencies. So like as I mentioned, high impact sort of digital crime, and so it's kind of interesting from that perspective. Like you can see a lot of sophisticated attacks, but the company I'm working now is specializing on the SMB sector, so it's like more sort of run-of-the-mill kind of attacks, and less sophisticated. But it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, everybody's using the same tools. So obviously, everybody's talking about generative AI and transformers and ChatGPT. So what is this presentation about? It's not about generating nice pictures like the one on the left, which I made. It's kind of a selfie from the Godfather's coffee in where the actual movie was shot. But it's about how do we, AI is very good at sort of generating content, but can he help us to basically do reasoning and logic in security operations? And most people don't think about security operations as a place where you should use logic and reasoning. So traditionally, but it's basically a fact, and people forget that the job they are doing is kind of very cognitive in its nature. So I'm going to talk about the main problems of security operations and how reasoning sort of enters as an equation, and like what kind of limitations you have in place, especially when you are considering people doing that job, and how can we use AI not to generate pictures, but out to kind of support those teams in their decisions. There's a bit of kind of quotes there, but one thing to remember is security. So there's a nice quote from Bruce that only amateurs attack machines, professional target people. This is my favorite one from a book, which is also now a TV series. An investigation, assumption kills, and also there's various stats, but one of the latest one refers to a data breach, and 74% of those are basically related to kind of the human element. We shouldn't focus too much on technology, but one way to see that is how do you use technology to help people. Yeah. So in security operations, there are a lot of challenges, and they change over year. This is a snapshot from two different surveys, from 2020 on the left and 2023 on the right side. You can see, 4 years ago now, people were very stressed out. 73% mentioned essentially massive amount of workload, lack of visibility. Nobody wants to work 24/7, I guess. There are too many alerts, and it's very hard to find people to put in this kind of job. 2023 is a little bit different. So it's there's more mention about context. There's still shortage of people. Problem with visibility, missing automation orchestration, and finding high-skilled personnel to put on that job. So you can see that there's kind of a variety of problems. None of them. So there's a lot of mention of stress. Stress, high volume, skilled people. So there's a shortage of people, high volume, and essentially how there's a mismatch between the amount of volume and the kind of human processing power, right? That you need to stay behind these kind of attacks. So I mean, this is kind of a quick snapshot. Like it's from another survey. Typically in security operations, you have 4 stages. You can have 6 or 4, so it depends on the framework you're using. So you have detection when you receive an alert. You have triage, which is done by what they call a tier 1 analyst. Then you have investigation, you have response. And most of the time is spent on triage, and then investigation response. And unfortunately, yes, still most of this process is manual. So 80%, it's what people have claimed to be sort of based on manual operations. So why reasoning? Yeah, so like people forget, like people that work in SOCs, in SOC teams, they come from different backgrounds, not necessarily from obviously psychology or cognitive science. You can't have multiple degrees. It probably comes from a computer science background, maybe engineering or ex-military could be. So people forget that, but essentially what you have to do on a day-to-day basis is to make decisions. And so how do you make decisions? Well, informed decisions, you have to reason. There are 3 types of reasonings, and probably I don't want to spend too much time. Some of them, I think you do it on a everyday basis. You have deductive reasoning, where you start from a premise. All mammals have kidneys. All whales are mammals. Then the conclusion is all whales have kidneys. Or you can go inductive reasoning, which is bottom up. So you have an observation. So every time we see a creature that with wings, it's a bird. We see a creature with wings, and then the creature is likely to be a bird. And then abductive reasoning is a little bit more complicated. So, but it's something we do like unconsciously most of the time. So, for example, you see a car that can start, and you see sort of a blob of liquid under the engine, and then you find this most likely explanation that maybe the car has a leak in the radiator. There's actually more formal reasoning. So like there is analogical reasoning. So when you make comparisons between 2 or more things in order to make inferences or arrive at conclusions. Causal reasoning, where essentially you want to identify links between cause and effects. And probabilistic reasoning, where you essentially have some sort of likelihood of events and probability of outcomes, and you want to make some statistical analysis about this process. Those 2 are probably the most difficult ones that people struggle, to be honest. But in just to make some examples, I made like 4 cases that are very common. So like people that work in security operations will probably see all of these 4, and they do involve. So to solve that case, to solve that kind of problem, you have to apply some sort of reasoning. I'm just going to pick the first one because we don't have too much time. So a cybersecurity team received alerts about potential unauthorized access to a sensitive data within this network. The logs indicate several failed login attempts, followed by a successful login from a new IP address. And the team needs to determine whether it's a security breach and identify the source. Yeah. Abductive reasoning. Yeah, you have the same security team. There was an expected shutdown of several servers simultaneously. The shutdowns cause downtime and disrupt business operations, and the team needs to quickly hypothesize the most likely cause to address this kind of issue. And you can make lots of these kind of examples. And when you make these investigations or like triage, you need to be fast, right? Because if you look at statistics now, we see attacks are really coming really fast. So the fastest one that was recorded this year, it was 2 minutes and 7 seconds. Yeah. So the attacker came in. So they had the usual recon phase, and then they had initial access. Once they've done that, they did a quick discovery. And then they compromise the victim within 31 seconds. Yeah. So imagine doing all this kind of amount of cognitive reasoning in 2 minutes and 7 seconds. It's really challenging, especially when you have 100 or 1,000 cases on a daily basis. Yeah. So it's really hard to make this. Yeah. Which comes to, and we probably have seen this, and previous speakers in this podcast have kind of explained about this this concept. So Daniel Kahneman, rest in peace. I think he passed away this year, a few months ago. Sort of hypothesized that the kind of human brain has two systems of thinking. So you have system one, which is the intuitive and instinctive thinking mode, where you can make really fast, sort of unconscious decisions that are associative in nature, and it's almost like an autopilot. Yeah. And people sort of speculates that this was something that we developed as primates, many millennia ago, as our bodies evolved to survive. Yeah. So like like if there is a tiger that is approaching you, you can't think too much. You have to you have to run away, right? So in a way, the brain was evolved to react to this kind of dangerous situations. So we have this kind of behavior. But of course, as a species, as we evolved over time, we also developed the speech component or brain. And the visual part is quite big, right? So compared to other animals, I think we have the largest visual cortex, but the smell, it's very tiny, right? So if you can see in terms of proportions. So yeah, with that in mind, so humans, we are very visual animals. We have developed these unique features of language and reasoning, and so we have this kind of new way of thinking, which we call rational thinking, the system two. It's slower, it's kind of logical, it's kind of lazy, yeah, because you sort of feel the effort when you perform this kind of reasoning. And sometimes it's indecisive, right? So you have multiple sort of options, and you're not sure which one you want to take. So what's happening in security team is that, unfortunately, because of the pressure and the amount of data that we process, most people, and I don't have a way to prove it, because it's very there's not many research being done, but most people work in system one. Yeah. So like they rely on the instinct that they developed by experience, which have nothing to do with nature, of course. We're working with computers. There are no tigers. There are no trees in computers. So it's a very different situation. But our brain, so it just go to system one, and very little time is spent doing system two. Yeah. Because you don't have the luxury most of the time. Maybe if you have a very large team where you have what we call tier 3 people, where maybe one day they don't have a lot of alerts dealing with. They can sort of spend maybe 1 or 2 hours and say, hey, let me go back to that case. Like, I think, like I didn't do it properly. Let's work it out and revise the evidence to see if there's something I missed. Yeah. And so my hypothesis is, like, can we use LLMs to essentially help us thinking in system 2? Yeah. And the other hypothesis is, can we have a reward that sort of push people, like in sub teams, to move from a system 1 to a system 2 mode? Yeah. Because of course, if you if you pay people for the amount of alerts they review on a daily basis, guess what they're going to do is they're going to basically say, well, I'm going to do all these alerts, review all of them, and I'm basically going to randomly assign like a conclusion or so sort of tag these alerts as incidents, false positive or true positive. Yeah. So the problem is, yes, so there's the reward signal. So how do you actually shift this human behavior with the right quality metrics? And the second one is, can we give them some tools to move to system 2? There are, of course, cases where actually having a system 1 works. I found it like in very rare occasions that was very useful. And typically, I mean, there is an example here on my left where the kind of what is called stereotypical thinking, where, for example, you have a user, so there's a human doing some sort of behavior. It's that person was new. He doesn't know the company policies. He's in marketing. He doesn't have a computer science degree. He installed something probably unintentionally, and then it was some sort of freeware that contains some malware, or not malware, but some sort of spam advertising, as they call it now. And so yes, there was an alert, but actually it was probably a minor incident because it was just like unwanted software, and it's not a big deal. Yeah. So in those cases, maybe system 1 fast decisions can help, because you can sort of identify the persona and the kind of typical behavior. Of course, you can be totally wrong, because maybe that person is actually very experienced, or he was a spy hired by a foreign agency that was posing as a marketing expert, and you just totally missed that kind of hypothesis. Yeah. System 2, on the other side, yeah, it requires a lot of a lot of reasoning, a lot of cognitive abilities, and you have to provide evidence. You have to consider more hypotheses, and basically assign some sort of score to each hypothesis, match that with the evidence, and achieve to a conclusion. Yeah. So I've seen very few people doing system 2 thinking. And even though there are manuals that talk about alternate competing hypotheses, that was done by an old manual by the CIA, even CIA operatives forget about those techniques. Yeah. So it's very hard to move people to do this kind of system 2. This is a wonderful picture I found from this source. You can Google it. And it's amazing. So how much cognitive biases can manifest in our daily life, but also professional life. There are like 180 cognitive biases, which are classified in sort of 3 four-main categories. So you have something related to too much information, or not enough meaning, or like something about acting fast, which applies mostly to security operations. And then like the gray one is about what should we remember. Yeah. So none of these I haven't seen any research being done on basically testing these cognitive biases in security operations, because it's very hard to get those people to do surveys and do some some sort of randomized control trials to essentially kind of experiment and measure this kind of biases. But personally, I've seen a lot of them, like on a weekly basis. Like every time I see something, it's like, oh, that's base rate fallacy, like plain, alloy fact, choice overload, optimist bias. I just mentioned a few of them that I kind of see really, really frequently in security operations. So alloy fact, this is kind of obvious. It happens like all the time. You have a new hive, maybe it's a very like famous or popular experience. I don't know, SOC manager or a famous researcher on Twitter. There's a lot of those people doing like open research, and like he joins your team and say, hey, this, oh wow, he's very senior. He has done a lot of work in threat intelligence. He must be really good. He's well dressed, very outspoken. He has, I don't know, 10 years of experience in threat intelligence. Anything he says, I trust 100%. Yeah, so there's no doubt in anything he's doing, and of course, people can be wrong. So like everybody follow this person, and if he just with one mistakes and everybody else kind of follows that kind of assumptions, and you basically miss the attack in your network. Availability heuristic, this happens all the time, so we tend to overestimate rate risk, unfortunately, and underestimate common ones. So I've seen a lot of SOC teams and CISOs like really like overspending on like something that doesn't really happen very often in your business, and then they were left open to like very basic attacks because they felt, well, that's it's quite common, like what it just happens all the time. So why but the rare one, like I saw that in the news, it was amazing. It was like somebody got lost lots of money. So this happens all the time, yeah. So, and typically what happens is either you misattribute the attack because you're reading something in the news that is very popular, something that is trending. It's like, oh yes, it must be that. So it's everybody's talking about this phishing campaign, so it must be Miss Pado, yeah, in this case. But actually, it was it was another vulnerability. It was abused by Darkgate, another kind of malware. So that's another one. Confirmation bias, yes, all the time. I've seen this all the time. So there's a data breach. Hey, we have the best XYZ solution. It's impossible. Like that was an outsider. It must have been an insider. Yeah. So like it's impossible. Like we are super strong on our perimeter. We have all the latest technology, and then let's find like anomalous behavior between our core team and the engineering team, or the dealership team, or the new hires, and then you find all these, of course, like suspicious behavior because there's lots of anomalies in your network, and then you do all this investigation. Maybe 6 weeks later, you discover that your SolarWinds was compromised. Yeah, so like the most expensive tool was actually a remote management solution. There was a supply chain attack, and you just didn't think of that, right? Because you thought that it was an insider, right? That couldn't have been one of our vendors. So this happens all the time in the news as well. Decision fatigue, that's obvious. That like the amount of work you do in a SOC team is like incredible. I used to work in a sort of high caliber, high pressure environment, and there was 24/7, multiple time zone, overlapping teams, like very trained people, huge pressure coming from customers about potential incidents, tickets, like ticketing about anything like suspicious behavior, vulnerability triggers. Like it was just like a war zone, basically, yeah. And just it was impossible for those people to basically cover the entire alert space. Yes, they had something like 1,000 alerts per day, and they had to do really fast to decide what to do. Yeah, like should they escalate, should they investigate, should they ignore that? And most of the time, what was happening, they will just have, as I mentioned before, some basic system one thinking, and they will look at these alerts, like use their intuition that think that was working, and they will just basically say, well, I'm going to take these 5 alerts, you take those 10, like it seems like they're interesting, and we will just ignore everything else, yeah, because you don't have enough people. It's impossible, yeah. Another one, very common base rate fallacy. I think we have talked about this in previous presentations. Is essentially when you sort of ignore the individual information. So we tend to assign a greater value to the specific information. So when you buy these wonderful tools that they do detection, the vendor unfortunately will claim the detection rate, and they would say, oh, okay, that's it's like it's perfect, 0.9, it's 1%, yeah. So the detection rate that is 100%, but I have a little bit of a false alarm rate, yeah. It's just 0.00001%, yeah. And then because none of us are mathematicians, most people like they don't know, right? Yeah, they don't know about this base rate fallacy. They think it's great, right? Like this product is great, like it's 1%, 100%, and the tiny number of false alarm rate, like I shouldn't see much. But then if you do the maths, which are based on the fact that your network is probably 99, I hope 99% safe, and 1% with malicious activity, is very imbalanced. So the estimated detection rate is actually 66%. And if your vendor, it's kind of a 100%. Yeah, a lot of people claim that, but in reality, it's around 70%. With the same false alarm rate, actually the detection rate is far lower. It's 58%, which is almost 50-50. Yeah. So when you look at these alerts, you have this kind of in your mind, you already assume that that's perfect. Yeah, it can't be a false positive because hey, it's 100%. And so when you do this kind of assumption, yeah, so everything else you put in that investigation, it's sort of try to support that kind of decision, yeah. And then you realize maybe after a few days or weeks, like, oh yeah, it was a false positive. I wasted like 3 days or 2 weeks chasing that. So this is kind of a nice picture. So I kind of made with a stable diffusion. So like can we use AI in some way to be like either a parrot? Yeah, a lot of people thinks that AI it's a stochastic parrot. Yeah, so that is just repeating things. Or can we use that in a way that is more like a fox? That has some sort of it's intelligent. It's very he has it's a very strongly motivated. Yeah, so there's a goal, and it's basically doing your best to outsmart the kind of challenges. Yeah. So we have two type of in terms of reasoning. So I mentioned before, we have like 4 main categories, and people have actually now been investigating how LLMs are actually able to reason in this kind of modalities. And it's a very kind of new kind of area of research. So you can see it's like from 2022, 2019, people have been creating this kind of data set. And essentially each data set is designed, it's based on human performance, yeah, and is sort of focusing on one type of reasoning, yeah. So you have causal reasoning, you have logical reasoning, non-textual semantic reasoning, and common sense reasoning. And of course, in our case, common sense reasoning doesn't really apply to security operations because we're not talking about people in their daily life doing cutting carrots or fixing bikes, and kind of what does that produces in terms of risk. We are mostly kind of looking at logical reasoning and causal reasoning, and a little bit of mathematical reasoning. Yeah. So people are kind of impressed, like they've been doing these experiments, and it's like how is possible that like LLMs, people were thinking, hey, they're just parrots, yeah. So they are statistical parrots. You have an input, you have an output, and they're just trying to predict the next token to essentially maximize a loss function. But if you sort of prompt or push the LLM to think. Yeah, so there are like various techniques, like you can do fine tuning, chain of thought, tree of thought, rational refinement, and various other ones. You can essentially try to replicate the kind of logic of human reasoning. Yeah, so it's not magic. It's about how do you actually prompt the actual machine to follow a certain pattern. Yeah. And in that way, so we start to see some results. Yeah. So in this kind of 3 or 4 areas, we have inductive reasoning. You can see this performance on these 2 data sets. GPT-4 with prompt engineering, it's 28/30, so it's pretty good. BART is 20/30. But unfortunately, there are other data sets where they sort of fail miserably. Yeah, like the CLATIA data set, it's 11/30, 7/30, and 3/30. So it depends on the kind of task. On some of them they excel quite. I would say it's pretty good performance. The other ones really bad. Deductive reasoning is where most of the LLMs work quite well. So you can see performance is around 30, 28 in both of these 2 data sets. Abductive reasoning, it's kind of okayish for now. So yeah, GPT-4 that is still winning 25/30. Somebody else was able to reach like 26/30. But there is kind of good progress on that side. Yeah. Common sense reasoning, yeah, we don't care because in our case, it's not something we can apply, but it's kind of interesting to see that some of them are struggling. So you have 21, 25/30. In the other cases, it's like 20. It's kind of there's kind of a lot of variance in this kind of type of thinking. Causal reasoning is pretty good as well. So we are sort of around 25, 24/30, and it's something about estimating cause effects in medical data sets, or also like sort of general common sense questions. So I can go forward. There's also mathematical reasoning. It's not that good. So we have 20/30, 16/30 for the largest models. So overall, it's like we're not achieving human or superhuman performance. So it's not that we finally managed to beat people. In some areas, like specifically deductive reasoning, we are doing quite well with LLMs. In inductive and abductive, yeah, we're kind of still struggling. Yeah. And mixed form, it's a combination that it sort of works well in if you consider some specific metrics. There are several ways to kind of know if an LLM is performing correctly or without hallucinations, if it's actually following the right perspective and is actually trying to actively follow some logical reasoning. Yeah. So this is something that we have done internally. So we actually took 2 groups, 2 security teams. One was without aid. So like they were just doing their daily job as they used to do over 5 years. And when we took another team where from day one, we sort of paired them with our security copilot, which was basically not forcing them, but essentially giving them some explanations about how they should approach a specific case. Yeah. So that team would open an incident, and the virtual security analyst will produce will basically produce some deductive reasoning or inductive reasoning, and produce the evidence and the steps required to reach to that conclusion. Yeah. So we have 3 metrics. One was the mean time to triage. So how long so what was the average time to triage an alert? Yeah. In terms of percentage, so 61% of the kind of overall time. Classification error, meaning that if they have done an investigation or a triage on a specific alert, they will basically we'll review that after 1 or 2 weeks, and we found that that was misclassified, so it was a true positive, false positive. And then the MTI was the mean time to investigate, which is mostly the entire life cycle from not just the alert, but also considering external sources of information. Yeah. So it took us a while. It wasn't easy, but like after 6 months, we were able to achieve this. And I think personally, it's an incredible result. Yeah, even though the sample was small, but yeah, for example, we managed to cut down the mean time to triage from 61% to 90%. The classification error was 32% to 5%. And the mean time investigate, we didn't have a huge gain on that one. So it went from 93% to 60%. And the reason was that mostly there were information that the LLM wasn't aware of that was coming from outside, and so it was basically lacking the actual context to make the decision. So yeah, I mean, it's a small trial, of course. Yeah, it doesn't have a lot of statistical, let's say, power, because yeah, it was 5 people. We are actively looking for universities or companies that want to essentially do this kind of experimentation. It's very hard, of course, because those people have basically zero time, like during the day. So it's really hard to say, hey, we're going to put like 50% of your team in this trial, and they're going to use the security Copilot, and like maybe it's going to be better than the other one. So it's very hard to get these data points, but it's kind of a tangible, it's a tangible feedback that actually they do. It is possible to reason and help people in these kind of stressful situations. So as a conclusion, I think we're almost there. Did we sort of achieve general AI? No, of course, yeah. So we like, can these objects really think? Yeah, or they're just parroting logical reasoning? And there is evidence now that with these bigger models like GPT-4 and the latest ones like Bigstral with the mixture of experts, there is actually some evidence that these machine, these objects are start to build some sort of word models. So they have sort of a theory of mind that in some cases resembles the mind of a 7-year-old. There were some experiments try to compare kind of a human to what was the age at which they achieve similar experiences. Mathematics, it will be big if these models are able to find new conjectures or proofs, but for now they're stuck at basic mathematics. There are interesting things where LLMs are when you train them to sort of infer A from B, they fail to learn the opposite concept, which is kind of interesting. And like, why is that happening is still unclear. And they kind of show now with this drawing and seeing, so image captioning, image description, having that extra 3-dimensional information might even improve the reasoning abilities. Yeah, because as humans, we experience a 3-dimensional world with physics, and like, yes, you can describe physics in mathematical formulas or I guess equations, but like there is also some sort of intuitive, right, like simplified models in your brain that can actually help you to reason from this kind of experience. So yeah, you probably can recognize this gentleman here from NVIDIA, but I think I can stop now, and as open to questions. And as I mentioned before, I'm very open to finding people that wants to apply and discover how cognitive biases works in security operations. But I think it's 45 minutes, and I'll just let people to ask questions now.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation to the Cognitive Security Institute. You may learn more about topics in cognitive security by visiting us at cognitivesecurity.institute.